In the last video in this series, I was saying that I needed exactly 100 parts to make these 10 clocks. Well, here they are. And because I had already cut up templates to the exact lengths, I was able to cut these pieces in, I'm sure it was under an hour. And that includes ripping the spindles to 3/4 of an inch square. Now, turning these 40 little spindles down is probably going to be the most time-consuming thing that I have to do yet, so I might as well do that first and get it out of the way. And here I'm drilling holes dead center where the tailstock is going to insert. Less chance of it splitting out and flying apart at that high RPM that I'm going to be using. Okay, here we go for the first one, and they'll probably turn down much the same way as the cedar ones did. In some of my other videos I mentioned how this mahogany is a very powdery dust, and I also mentioned how big I am on dust collection. Well, this is about as good as we can get here. I'm going to speed the lathe up here a little bit. A small spindle like I'm using right here likes high RPM, so I'm going to go up to about 2,000 or so. Now this lathe will go a lot faster. It'll go over 3,300. This wood lathe duplicator from General Tools is just perfect for making sure that each spindle is identical. You know, I could never ever do this by hand. The duplicator has followed along the template exactly now, and this is as deep as it's going to go. Here I'm slowing it down for the sanding. The sandpaper has a tendency to get really hot really fast at a higher RPM. Okay, there we are with number 1. Now I just do that 39 more times. And did I say I was going to have these ready by Christmas? The cutter that came with this wood lathe duplicator does slowly lose its nice sharp cutting edge, so periodically I do resharpen it. It seems to help a bit. The best way I can describe this cutter to you is it's like a little tiny mini scraper, like a 1/16 inch scraper. It doesn't come to a sharp point, it is rounded off at the end. I was at Home Depot and I picked up a package of felt pads that I can use as feet on the bottom of these clocks. And they were only $8.97 for 96 of them. Now that turns out to less than 10 cents per pad, or under 40 cents per clock. That's not bad. You're looking at 39 completed spindles there. But this is the one I've actually been waiting for. The last one. I should have done this one first. I'd have been done yesterday. After I got a bit of a rhythm going here, I timed myself to see how long it was actually taking me, and it took approximately 7 minutes to complete one spindle and start on the next one. I went through lots of little pieces of sandpaper. Started out at 80 grit and worked up to 320. And you know, only once did I accidentally let go of a piece and it got sucked into the dust collection system. Now I know I could have used the sander here to make these edges nice and smooth, but by using the jointer, I take off the exact same amount from each one, and I still end up with a nice smooth edge. These mahogany boards are already sanded pretty good on one side, but I'm just giving them a little touch here just to make them perfect. And the inside of the clock doesn't have to be sanded, so I'm just going to leave the other side of the boards alone. Here I'm cutting out a slot in the sides of the clock for the dial boards, doing it pretty much the same way as I did the cedar clock, except I'm making the slot a little wider, and that's going to take a little less trimming down on the dial boards. Now I'm pretty sure that I had the router bit set to the right depth there for that slot, but I'm just checking to make sure that when I've got the dial board set all the way into the slot, that the dial itself will actually still be accommodated. I cut a leftover piece of cedar here to the same dimensions as the tops and bottoms of the mahogany. Just wanted to make sure that I'm not going to make the groove too long. I want to make sure that those stop blocks are set just right. Well, thanks to that scrap piece of cedar, I found out that the groove that I was routing out there is too short. So now I've made some adjustments, got it just right, and here we go on the real stuff. Now I've got that slot routed out just exactly the right length. The glass that I'm using from those dollar store picture frames is just a smidge over 1/16 of an inch thick. And the smallest router bit that I've got is 1/8 of an inch. So that means there's going to be almost a 1/16 of an inch play. Nothing much I can do about it. I can't think of any other way that I can cut a narrower slot than that, at least with what I've got. These are the removable backs for the clocks. And if I don't trim the top and bottom down to make them a little bit narrower, so they're not quite so thick in other words, it's going to be really hard to slide them in and out of those slots that have been routed out in the top and the bottom. And in other words, a person won't be able to take the back off easily to change the battery or set the clock. This is that 1/8 inch bit I was talking about. I picked it up on my last trip to Kelowna. It's made by Simona. And at first it didn't cut too bad, although it did seem to take a lot of pressure. And towards the end, though, I felt I was sort of burning my way through the wood. I wasn't really cutting my way through. And fortunately, I was able to use my table saw to finish the job. You know, I was just looking at all the work that I'd done with this bit, and there was less than 30 lineal feet. This bit should have lasted a lot longer than this. I won't be buying any more Simona bits. I'm about ready to start drilling the holes now where the pocket hole screws are going to be holding the tops to the sides. And because these sides are mirror images of each other, and because they don't all match, I want to make sure that I got matching pairs before I get started here. Now for the tops and bottoms, it's not as crucial as it is for the sides. I just have to make sure that I find a top that's going to match whatever pair of sides that I've got. And I'm not going to be assembling this clock until after the varathane is on anyway, because there will be subtle color changes after the varathane goes on. So I'll be matching everything up then. But right now I'm going to be drilling these holes, and I have to make sure that everything matches up. I've got the pocket hole jig fastened down to the little bench here now, and I've got a piece of scrap wood there to act as a stop so that each piece will be in exactly the same place in the jig. But before I actually start drilling that real mahogany, I better take a piece of scrap that's the same thickness just to make sure that everything's going to be okay. And this looks okay, so here we go with the real thing. And there we are, the sides for 10 clocks, each piece having its mirror image counterpart. Those pocket holes that I just drilled out, they're going to be to hold the tops of the clocks to the sides, but the bottoms here, I'm just going to drill holes and just use screws up through the bottom. If you'll recall, when I was countersinking the holes in the bottoms of the cedar clock, I accidentally went a little too far. Well, I've set the stops on the drill press here, so that's not going to happen. All the 40 holes are drilled out and countersunk. Well, here's those 100 pieces. They're basically done now. Most of the work on them is done, except for some sanding on the tops and the bottoms. And then, of course, I got to cut that glass. And then after that, I guess it's a case of just varnishing them, putting them together, putting the dials on, putting the movements in, and they'll be done. They will be ready for Christmas.